Welcome to Recovering Addict. I'm LT. I'm an alcoholic addict.
I'm Felice, married to this guy.
We have a special guest tonight. His name is Dr. Danny McGuire Jr. He spent over 20 years. I'm going to read his bio real quick. 20 years in law enforcement unit and until a career-ending injury and subsequent injuries required him to retire. His position was, listen to this, Chief Crisis Hostage Negotiator with the Chicago Police Department and SWAT team. It's going to be a good story, y'all. Danny currently is the department chair at Calumet, I'm sure I said that really wrong, College of St. Joseph for Criminal Justice and Public Safety Programs. Danny earned his Bachelor of Science in Law Enforcement Management from there's that word again, Calumet College. It's like C-A-L-U-M-E-T. Calumet College. We'll let him clarify when he gets in here. He's got a Master's of Counseling and Psychology from Adler School of Professional Psychology, Master in Public Administration from Clemson University, Master's of Science, Foods and Nutrition in the University of Georgia, and a Doctorate of Education emphasis, Ethical Leadership from Olivet Nazarene University. Danny is also a mental health therapy intern at Jacqueline Augustine and Associates, where he contracts on first responders, specializing in individual therapy. Danny takes his mind, body, spirit, or holistic approach to his therapy and is grounded in cognitive behavioral therapy. Danny has also completed his certified alcohol and drug counseling coursework and is currently looking to do his intern to gain his licensure.
License to kill.
Danny is the father. Listen to this. Some of us can relate to this part too. Danny is the father of a special needs adult son who was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder the day before his second birthday and is profoundly impacted by his diagnosis. Danny is not a stranger to sobriety and relapse, as he is recovering alcoholic and thankful to God for his sobriety. Danny truly believes that for one, much is given, much is expected. Luke 12:48. Therefore, he uses his experience, education, talent, and natural love for people to help them through difficulties, because through difficulties comes great things. Without any further ado, Danny, welcome to the show.
There's
Hi,
Johnny.
how are you?
Good. How are you?
Oh, yeah. It's Calumet College.
Calumet.
There you go.
Oh,
Cool.
so just how it's spelled. I
Yeah,
guess.
weird.
Calumet.
I can't read. Imagine that.
We talked about this
Excellent.
today.
Thank you for
Yeah,
having me.
finish.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Glad to have you. So, man, there's so much in your bio. Like, obviously, we all want to hear the crazy stories of hostage negotiating and police department, or what it's like to be a therapist helping people that are first responders. Or, man, there's some of us who have kids like we do, who have traumatic brain injuries. And how the heck do you get through life like that? How do you get through all this school? And then what? You're an alcoholic as well in recovery. There's so much to unpack. So I'm going to let you just start where you feel is relevant for everybody to hear, and just let you take it away. And I'll jump in, clarify, ask questions and things like that too.
Well, thanks. So by the grace of God, I'm sober. On the 19th of this month, it'll be 2 years. So I'm very happy about that, and thankful to God for that. Praise him every day. And, life's journey for me started young. My dad was a police officer in Chicago. I did a substantial amount of time there. I kind of followed in his footsteps and, wanted to become a police officer. So I started young. My first full-time sworn job was when I was 21 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And that, as we were talking before the show, it was in a federally funded narcotics task force. And, I worked undercover, and it was a very stressful job. My extent of that world wasn't very vast, and it was very difficult for me to navigate. And that's really when the drinking started, kind of self-medicating. And
in your early 20s?
Yeah. I mean, It started really, a couple things happened on the job that, were pretty stressful. You'd call it maybe a traumatic incident now, or a critical incident. And, the sleeping trouble starts, and all these things start happening, which are perfectly normal when someone's been through a traumatic event. And, back then when you went to somebody and said, hey, what do you do for help? They're like, hey, kid, I have 16 Miller Lights over there and, a couple shots of Jameson, everything will be just fine. You're like, okay, right. Yeah. Don't worry. Don't tell nobody about it. Just drink more. It's good for you. Right. Yeah. So, that was the extent of therapy then, right? Because
Yeah.
that would be seen as weakness, which I always tell police officers now, 30 years later, talking to them, I say, the longer I waited to get help, the weaker I got. That was the weakness, not getting help, right? Public service message number one, I tell them always to lighten it up a little bit, because they still feel when you're dealing with someone in law enforcement, the average person might experience a traumatic event 1 to 2 times in their entire life. A police officer may experience 20 to 30 in their career, and somewhere like, big city, urban, Chicago, almost 3 million people, they may experience 20 in their first 5 years of their career. So,
Wow.
right. So you're talking about drinking from a fire hydrant. So, as time went on, things just got worse with the drinking, and then I left the narcotics squad and went to Chicago from another department, Chicago. And then I followed my father's footsteps, and I worked in patrol, saw some crazy things there, went to special operations section. And then from there, I got on the hostage barricade terrorist team. Now they call it SWAT, but I started there. And you see stuff that just isn't normal. You tell stories to people, they want to hear stories. You tell them stories and they're like, there's no way that happened. I'm like, it did happen. I saw it. So those things really weigh on you. As I said in my bio, I have a natural love for people, right? I love people. I love people and I love helping people. And when you see what people will do to each other, it's not a good thing, especially when you're like, how can this happen? Like, why can this happen? Then you start to question faith. You start to question a lot of things. And then the drinking just goes deeper. You just go deeper into it. I mean, I remember the first time I got sober, I was 28 years old. I got sober. Try being 28 years old in a place like Chicago and be sober. You're sitting there in the parking lot with people after work. Everyone's drinking a beer, right? And they're like, you want a beer? You're like, no, I don't drink. And then some old timer goes, if he doesn't drink, you can't trust him. And you're like, well, you can't trust me because I don't drink. That was the mystique. Like, well, what do you mean you don't drink? You're not normal if you don't drink, So you don't fit in with the people socially, and then you become like this pariah, right? Who's this? You don't want to hang out with that guy. He doesn't drink. He's no fun. Hey, how are you?
Saying hi to Chris.
Hey. So it was very difficult to navigate those things, plus my family has a history of alcoholism. So it was really, really tough to be in those positions and then sustain them. Then, you have kids, and then your kid is diagnosed with autism the day before his second birthday, and then therapy services, they're telling you, oh, these therapy services will help, but by the way, they're not covered by your insurance. What do you mean they're not covered by my insurance? So now you start working all these crazy jobs. You're not sleeping, all these things. And I had been sober when we had met, I think last week, LT. Yeah. I told you I was sober for 6 years, 11 months, 2 weeks and 3 days. Right.
Uh-huh.
So I know I quit May 15th of 1999. And I sustained sobriety through 2006. And if I did the math, I could probably tell you the exact date I drank. I could tell you those days, but I can remember where I was, and I started drinking again, relapse. And I hit the ground running right where I left off. I didn't like, oh, okay, I'm just going to have one. Right. Sure. So right. I think I had 21, you know what I mean? Like, just rolled right into it.
So that was considered long-term sobriety at that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What do you think happened now that you've got all these degrees and you're a doctor? And when you look back on that, how do you diagnose yourself as to why you relapsed?
Well, a couple things, right? One of your reels had talked about your brain talking to you, right? Like, and we talked about this. You could have one. You could just have one. Come on. What do you mean you can't have one? You could have one. Come on, you don't worry. Trust me. Have one. And that's kind of how it started. I mean, I was going through a divorce with my kid's mother. I had Danny going on, my son, the pressure of working all these side jobs, being exhausted all of the time, going to school. While I was going to school at that time for my master's in counseling. Mm-hmm. So I figured, well, I know psychology. I can handle this. right?
Think my way out of
Why
this
not?
thinking problem.
Right. Pressure from people that you know that have no idea. You know what I mean? They have no idea what your life is like. Come on, you could have one, right?
Right.
I have a couple beers, loosen up. You know, you're always so uptight. Sure, sounds like a great idea. You know, wait until I have one. You're gonna wish you never asked me to have one.
You wish
right?
you never met me after this.
Right. Because we're gonna be at the casino, right? We may lose your car, and your wife is gonna be really pissed at me and never want you to go out with me again. That's just the way it's gonna be because we're not going home, right? So, I think to answer your question, I think all of those pressures, you know, the pressure. My dad was a hero on the police department, right? My dad was a bomb tech. He disarmed a bomb. Hey, how are you, Aubrey? My dad disarmed a bomb on the job, and he received all these awards of valor. Was in the newspaper, on the news, all this stuff. You know, and then like, how do you follow that lead? You know what I mean? As this kid, you know, everyone's.
Did you feel like you had big shoes to fill then?
Oh my
pressure
God.
like that?
My dad's 5'4". I'm 5'10", and I felt like he was wearing size 20 shoes. You know, and of course I had to go to the same unit he was in before he went to the bomb squad. So immediately I got there, and they're like, "It's because you're Danny's kid."
Oh,
it's Danny too, right?
Nepotism.
Yeah. So that pressure, you know, and then getting on the HBT team. My dad was a sniper, so naturally I got to be a sniper, right?
Oh boy.
You know, so all of that, and then we played in the police bagpipe bands, right? So we played when the police officer would kill 90 duty, the bagpipe bands. We played in the bagpipe bands, and you know, there was a lot of pressure with that too. It was tough, and I we talked about this too, LT. Being in a bagpipe band is like the most horrible place for someone who's recovering to be, because that's all it is about drinking. Let's go play and drink. We're wearing kilts, we're wearing dresses. I mean, come on, let's just start drinking. It's awesome, right?
Go to the pub.
Right. You know, we'll have the bandmates over at our house, right? Mary and I, and you know, they'll go through like 2 cases. You know, they won't bring anything, first of all, right? So they'll come here and they'll go through like 2. The only thing they bring is beer, and they're just, you know, you want a hamburger? Why? I got pork chop in a glass right here. I don't know, what do I need that for? I got enough calories in this thing. So it's
pork
like
chop in a can,
right? Pork chop in a can, right? So I'm like, I don't. It's like the most unhealthy place for someone who's an addict to be. Absolutely, 100%. So, you know, there was a lot of that pressure, and at that time, it was just like the pinnacle. It was like the perfect storm: divorce, school, working side jobs, kids growing up. You know, I had 3 kids. You know, just everything. I was working on getting promoted on the police department, you know, seeing the things you saw in the police department, being in the bagpipe band, all of those things just kind of led to this, you know, you get to the peak of the hill and it's like right down, it goes really fast, you know. It was tough. And I think that's kind of what led to it. And all I had to have was somebody say, "Hey, you want a beer? I think you could use a beer." And I'm like, get a bucket, baby, get a bucket, you know, get 2 buckets. I think we need 2 buckets, right? We're going to go through these things quick. So then for 14 years, I lied to myself. You know what I'm talking about? Anybody who relapsed knows what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Where you're sitting here and you're drinking these beers in your garage by yourself, watching like, I don't know, Eastern European soccer. You don't even care what's on TV. You're just like, I'm just watching this because I'm not in the house. I'm in the garage and I'm drinking because I don't want to deal with anything. And you tell yourself the next day you wake up, you're like, "Damn, I'm quitting tomorrow. I'm never drinking again tomorrow." Guess what? You know, the demon pokes you on the shoulder going, "Hey, you need to get out in that garage." Right?
We got
damn relapse brain. You're right. She's right. Damn relapse brain. So you know, you're back in that garage tomorrow because first of all, I got a headache and I got to take care of this. Right. So I'm just going to go have another one and just, you know, just get rid of the headache. 1 turns into 50 and here you pass out waking up with the dog licking your forehead. That's just how it goes. Right.
Yeah.
So, for 14 years, I would tell myself when Luke quits hockey, because the hockey parents, you know, everyone's got a cooler, you're on the tournament, everyone's drinking in the, you know, in some hotel, you know, whatever conference room or something, you know, and if you don't drink, everyone's like, what the hell's going on? You know, and then I became the funny guy, you know, the things I told the kids that I'm pretty quick-witted. So the coaches would be like, hey, you got something to tell the boys? I'm like, yes. You know, and I probably can't say it on your show, but some of the things I tell the boys when they're 16 and 17, and the coaches just were like, that's the best thing I ever heard in my life. You know, taking pictures of me with 30 empty bottles. 30 empty bottles. They're like, how are you walking? I'm like, let's go to strip club, baby. Let's go. Right? Let's go. Come on. You're going to get divorced tonight. Come on. Hang with me. You know what I mean? Like, I have just completely out of control for 14 years. And every after this hockey season, I'm quitting drinking. I'm going to quit because I need to quit. I made the best decisions of my life when I was sober. Nope, still can't do it. All right, I'm going to go a week without drinking. You know what I'm talking about? Like I'm going to go. Yeah. See, I went a week without drinking. I can control this. I control this. Go in the garage and it's like repeat. That's it. We're done. We're rolling. So it was 14 years of real darkness. You know. When I look back, and I never want to be there again.
Right.
You know, 51 years old now, you're like, you know, and then one day I just said I had enough. You know, I had enough. So started going to AA meetings again, started doing, you know, the steps, doing everything. And, you know, here I am now, you know, so I owe a lot of it to God. So,
amen.
I hate bargaining with myself too. I hate it. You know, it's pure hell. It is because you beat yourself up, right? You know, you beat yourself up. You know, and then I think back to my kids. You know, my son who's 20 now. You know, we went all over the country, him playing hockey, and they're taking pictures of me, like, you know, and his hockey team put on social media. I'm at a hockey party. I'm there for 3 hours. I'm not kidding you. And there's like a triangle pyramid of beers, and they're only mine because I'm the only guy to drink that kind of beer. And it's like, you know, and I'm sitting there like, yeah. And the one kid's like, yeah, it's cool. And they put the freaking G. That's what they put on social media. The freaking G. He's my hero. I'm like, I'm your hero. You know, like, man,
you're a great example.
Right. I saved people's lives on the police department. You know what I mean? I was, you know, I was on the Chicago Police Department HBT team, then SWAT team as a SWAT support and the chief hostage negotiator. I say, I'm your hero because I drank 30 beers in 3 hours. You know, no kidding. You know, and I'm like, I look back at that and I'm like, I keep those pictures. Compulsive mind can drive us to ruin. Yes, absolutely, John, 100%. And I look at those pictures now and I think, how embarrassed was my son?
Oh, right.
You know, like how was it embarrassing? And I recently sat down with, I mean, he's 20 now, you know, he's a college student going to school for special ed. You know, my daughter's 24. She's an accountant downtown Chicago. I mean, she kills it, you know, she's like a shark. She's awesome. And I sat down with both of them, you know, and I said, hey, you know, I apologize if I, you know,
say whatever you want.
Right. You know, like apologize if I was a bad dad and everything. They're like, no. Luke's like, no, man, the guys love you. I'm like, of course they did. You know, the hammerheads, you know, like they, you know, like what I was like, I must have embarrassed you. Luke's like, no, I wasn't embarrassed, but you could tell, you know, a little bit, you know what I mean?
Especially, I mean, that was the real you after the party and all that stuff too.
Yeah. Well, right. Right. And it was just, you know, I always had the cooler, you know, I was always the cool dad, you know, like, hey man, there he is. And I love that guy, but I hate that guy.
Yeah.
You know, man, a lot of stuff.
So let's go back to your 20s. Mm-hmm. You just get on with the police department. The police department's looking at you like nepotism got you where you're at. In your mind, you're trying to fill dad's shoes, who is in the newspaper for defusing bombs, the sniper, and you've got this pressure on you, and you become, what'd you say, undercover selling narcotics?
I was undercover my first four years with the Cook County Sheriff's Department. Cook County's in Chicago, right? Covers Chicago and the surrounding suburbs. And it was a federally funded narcotics task force. It was kind of like a one-time thing. The Cook County Sheriff received, you know, exorbitant amount of money from the government to start a task force to cover the south suburbs, which the police departments there were understaffed, had a hard time controlling the drug problems in the suburbs. So they hired us, and I was 21 years old. I might have shaved like twice a week. I looked like I was 16.
Yeah.
And some guy comes up to me in the academy, goes, hey kid, you know, Chicago guy. Hey kid, how old are you? I go, well, I'm 21. I'm here, right? And he goes, you ever buy drugs undercover? I'm like, how would I buy drugs undercover? I go, I was an athlete, I really don't know much about drugs, and he's like, you think you'd want to do that? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to do that. He's like, well, when the academy's over, we'll talk. So we went through the academy. We went through some field training, and the guy pulls me aside and he goes, your dad, I read your file. Your dad's Chicago cop. He's on the Gangs West unit on the HBT team. Yeah, he goes, go ask your dad if you heard of MEG. Metropolitan Enforcement Group is what MEG stands for. Ask him if you ever heard of us, and ask him, what his advice is, if you should go there, because you could come here if you want. The guy had a beard, long hair, earrings and stuff, who dressed up like a biker guy. I'm like, this guy's a cop? Like, I'm squared away, high and tight, hey, I'm here to save you, Superman's here, right? And I went home and told my dad, and my dad's like, yeah, my dad talks a little like that too. Hey, yeah, you should go there. They get like a car, they get to do what they want. I think it's a great idea, All right. So I go back the next day, tell the guy yes. Some dude picks me up in like a Firebird. I'm going old school. This is 1992, right? I'm 21 years old, and the guy picks me up in this red Firebird, and he's got the music jam, and he's old gray-haired guy, longer hair. I get there, and on my desk, there's keys to a brand new 5.0 Mustang LX.
What?
Seriously, 1992. It had
body,
61 miles on it. That's it. Like, I am going to drive this thing. I'm going to destroy this car. That's exact. I mean, you're 21.
They turned those into dare cars later.
Yeah, they did, right? So they're like, here's your car, here's your gas card. You can go to any county pump. You're going to get a fake driver's license with a fake name and fake address. The plates will come back. So if you get the plates run by the local police, they won't, the only ones they'll know is us. And your job is going to be to buy drugs. You're going to get informants, and you're going to go buy drugs.
Wow.
And, and I'm like,
where's your fear scale now from like 1 to 10?
Well, I was probably like about an 8, because I was completely out of my realm of influence, right. my realm of my circle of influence, like I had no idea what this was even going to be about. Like, so how do you do this? You just pull up to a guy and say, hey man, can you give me some drugs? Like, I don't know what to do. My extent of all of this was no knowledge whatsoever. It was terrifying. It was. And I remember going to my dad, and, my dad was a Vietnam veteran. He crawled around in tunnels in Vietnam.
5'4", yeah.
Yeah.
My dad did.
Yeah. He's, so, like the extent of his, I went up to him going, Dad, I'm not sure I'm going to be really good at this. He goes, did anyone ever tell you when I was 19 years old, I crawled around the tunnels in Vietnam? I go, yeah, I knew that. He goes, you know who was down there? I go, I don't know who. He goes, it wasn't Mickey Mouse. Go talk to your mother. I'm like, thank you, Gene. I'm like, I'll go talk to Ma. That's a good idea. You go talk to Ma, because I don't have time for this stuff. And he didn't say stuff, you know what I mean? So that was about the extent of the tough love. So
for his encouragement.
Right. And I wasn't going to talk to my mom about it, because my mom's Italian from Italy. So talk about melodrama, They got my baby buying drugs. Oh my God, what are you gonna do? Oh my God, like it's gonna be bad. So I'm just gonna go home. So I got engaged to my college sweetheart, which is important, right? She was going to nursing school. She was a very beautiful person, had a wonderful family. And then when I got entrenched into this, it was like pounding the round peg in the square hole. I wasn't built for that. I was built to serve, but I wasn't built for that capacity. I had no business being there, and but it's your first job as law enforcement. Usually people, like my dad would say when I'd complain about it, he'd go, dude, guys wait their whole career to go somewhere like this. You're there at 21 years old. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? And I'm like, yeah, I don't get that. It's not in my, it's not there. So, the drinking starts because the pressure's there. Like, I got to pull up to that corner with all those gangbanger guys and try to buy drugs. I mean, what if they pull out a gun? We'll pull out your gun and shoot them. Oh, okay. That's that simple. Oh, sorry. So, and that's just how it worked then, like, just go do it. So, it was very uncomfortable. The feeling inside, it would rip my guts out, man. If I'd be so amped up And so scared that, and I look so young that no one ever asked me if I was a police officer. Plus, you remember those Dare, they'd light those marijuana wafers and they make you smell it. Like, this is what marijuana smells like.
Yeah.
We had big bags of those. So I'd light like 2 or 3 and put in the ashtray. Go try to find a car with an ashtray now, right?
Yeah.
I put it in the ashtray. So when I roll up, the car would smell like weed, and the guys would be like, "Oh man, what you got in there?" Pam, I was 21 in 1992.
I was 12.
Right? Oh, thanks. See, Cam, there's always got to be one, right? So I'd light it up and I'd pull up and I'd roll down the window and the guys would be like, "Oh man, what you got in there?" I'm like, "Oh man, I don't know. What do you got?" And I'd start playing the dumb game and they thought I was just this dumb, entitled kid from the, suburbs, that's what they thought I was. And, but it was still just horrifying. Like, it took the anxiety and the stress. And that's when the drinking really amplified, like it started and then I started hanging out with the guys, and then the guys are like, "Oh, you're getting married? You're too young to get married. What's wrong with you? You should be out there partying," stuff like that. Hang out with us. And then that relationship, I was lying and doing everything I could.
So are you drinking at work and everything?
Oh yeah. Back then, you get in the surveillance van, you'd be sitting there doing a surveillance, in the van, big brown van on your block. Gee, I wonder who that is, right? And you're doing this video. You got to remember, it's video cameras that were like this big, and they had a periscope where it's like it's weird. And you just pop up the vent on this, it's like the Mystery Machine with Scooby-Doo. You pop up the top of the van and this thing's out there, and you're recording these guys on the street doing their dope dealing. And like the old timer I was working with, he goes, "Hey, you thirsty, kid?" Well, yeah. Did you bring anything? Like I got, pop, Coke. It's like that. No, that's not what I'm talking. I'll be right back. So, completely gets out of the surveillance van through the front, comes back with like a case of Miller Lite. He's like, "This is what I'm talking about, kid. We're going to be here a while, huh? Hey, have one, have two, have three." You're like, "Are we supposed to be doing this?" "Yeah, don't worry about it. It's fine." And that's what happens. You know what I mean? And then you go to work and, you might have a half dog on the way to work in the morning, just to kind of take the edge off, or you're going to go do a buy, man, take a couple hits of, grandpa's old cough syrup and everything will be just fine.
Courage, liquid courage. Yeah.
Right. Liquid courage. So you start doing those things and it just spirals out of control. There was a point in time I went to my dad and said, "This isn't for me, man. I'm done here."
Because you got to basically become the people that you're trying to fool, right?
Right. Right. But
you don't want them to see through you.
Before the show, I want to say this. LT and I were talking, and I had said I have a great deal of remorse for people that I arrested when I was on Chicago. That you'd arrest somebody with a bag or two of crack or something, because I look back and I think I just perpetuated a cycle of negativity in their life. Or sometimes I get by thinking maybe it was their rock bottom and it sent them into recovery. But most of the time, I don't think it was. But when I was on the county job buying dope, I'm dealing with mid-level people. I'm not dealing with even you pull up to a street dealer, you might take the guy off and say, "Who's supplying you?" And they're more than happy to tell you, "I don't want to go to jail, so it's that guy."
Yeah.
So, you're dealing with people who are sometimes creating addicts, if that makes sense.
100%.
So I don't really have a lot of remorse for those people, but I do for many of the people that I arrested with small level, you knew they were just there to buy dope and they had a problem, and you're like, because back in those days, you relied on, they had kind of like a point system, like a ranking system, like how many arrests you made, and then if you were in the bottom 10%, they'd counsel you like, "Hey, if you don't pick up your arrest, you're going to have to leave the unit."
Oh, wow.
Right. So they don't do quotas anymore. Thank God, because people started doing stupid shit like,
planting drugs.
Yeah, planting drugs or, like doing stuff like that. And you're like, you know what I mean? That's something I would never do and never did.
Right.
But some people would do it, and, that became very problematic. So they got rid of quotas, which is probably the best thing because, if you're a self-starter, you're going to go out there and do the job anyway. You're going to make it work. But the drinking really amplified then when I was in narcotics and, I started, it ruined my relationship with her and, it was tough, you know, it was very tough. I went to my dad. I said, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, this isn't me. I feel like I'm going crazy, you know? And he's like, don't worry about it. Don't talk to anybody about it at work. They're going to think you're nuts. You're going to go to Chicago. Chicago is going to be different. Well, let me tell you something, brother and sister. It wasn't different. You know, there were times I'd walk, you know, I'd walk in the roll call and I'd go to the bathroom and throw up. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, I just, this is not where I envision my life. And, you know, it was very difficult. And then when I was sober, especially, it was difficult because you didn't have to. I'm reading the comment.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Excellent. Congratulations.
So
Awesome.
I'll ask you a question since you're a police officer. This one time, it was about 2003. In between jail at this point. I'm on probation. I've relapsed. I got meth in my pocket, and I'm walking down the street with these dudes. It's probably 2 a.m. ish, right? And we walk behind. And I'm living in this old rundown apartment complex where it's like the movies. Yeah. All the apartment complexes on this top floor shared one bathroom.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
One of those where you had like a little room and a kitchen,
like a boarding house.
Yeah. And go down the hallway and there's a bathroom and you got your clawfoot tub and there's no shower. It's a bath. And that's where I'm living. It's like $300 a month or something. Walking down, we get surrounded by 2 cars, undercover cops, about 8 cops. And we had meth in our pockets and everything, right? These guys come up, shake us down, take our drugs. And when people are high.
Right? Yeah. Right. You know immediately.
These strike force dudes or undercovers were higher than we were, dude. I guarantee it. And then the rumor on the streets that is what they were doing is going around and just shaking dudes down, taking their drugs and staying high. Did you see any of that?
No. Well, so I worked in a unit
you got to rat out your boys. But.
I worked in a unit that they had a big scandal. It wasn't like that. I worked with a lot of different people. I have to say that, 99.9% of the police, from my perspective in Chicago, were upstanding people that wanted to help people. And there's like that 0.1%. It's when I go across and I do lectures to police, they'll say, man, you're from Chicago. And they always bring up the negative stuff, that they saw. And I'll go, look, man, like 10% of anything you deal with, a football team, a hockey team, a grade school class, whatever, 10%, there's people you just can't do anything with. Right.
Yeah, and they're the loudest and they cause the most light. And
I tell them any police department has 10% where like, you really can't do anything with them. Like they just you have no idea how they became a police officer. Chicago has 12,000 police officers. So there's 1,200 goofballs running around at any time. If you do the math that way. and I'm stretching really that, of course, because the Chicago Police Department, I have to tell you, is probably one of the most professional organizations that I've ever dealt with. You know what I mean? Now people will say you're crazy, but it's true. Because I've been out of it for a little while. My injury forced me to leave, and I would have stayed. And it got to a point in my job where I really loved it. I went from hating it to loving it. And the part I loved was when you actually help somebody. Like when you're the chief negotiator, you're monitoring negotiations. So you have negotiators talking, you're talking to SWAT team coordinator because you got the house surrounded and we're talking to each other constantly. And our job is preservation of life. SWAT team isn't like you see on TV where they're like, hey, we're going to go kill everybody. That never happens. Right. So it's always you're waiting. You're trying your hardest to give this person to walk out. So one of the biggest thrills that I ever got was the first job where I was actually the chief hostage negotiator. I'm watching the men and women work, talking on the phone, the SWAT team, we're coordinating, everything's going great. And then the person gives up and walks out alive. Some person who just said, I'm going to kill myself because I have nothing to live for. My girlfriend left me. I lost my job. My dog died. My mom and dad hate me. I have no money. I'm about to get thrown out of my apartment. So what do I have to live for? And that person walks out alive. You know what I mean? That was the most exhilarating thing in the world. Like I actually helped somebody. Like this is this is why I became a police officer, to really help somebody. And now I actually did it. That was very powerful. So I have to say that what you're talking about, those guys being high and stuff, it's very uncommon to see that, especially around here because they're constantly drug tested. Supervisors are exemplary and noticing that. And now we had officers in the last month, 3 of them kill themselves.
Oh, man.
Right? Commit suicide. So, you have relationship problems, you have addiction problems, you have all kinds of stuff going on with these people that are killing themselves, and the stress of work. They went a long time without their days off are canceled. They can't see their families, and now more than ever, supervisors and people are trained to see, like, detect and kind of snip out when someone's in a crisis, so they're trained to see if someone, are abusing alcohol. And if a supervisor thinks that you're drunk or thinks you're high, they'll send you right down for blood or urine, immediately. So that doesn't happen as frequently. Now, again, when I first came on the job, a guy would be sitting in a surveillance van and say, "Hey, let's get a case of beer, and we're going to be here a while," right?
Yeah.
It doesn't really, it's not really that prevalent anymore. There's a lot of video cameras. There's a lot of stuff. When I got on Chicago, we never drank in a squad car. Not one time.
Yeah.
Now, after work, in the parking lot, we might sit there for 4 or 5 hours. The sun be rising. You're like, "Ooh, I think I got to go home." You know what I mean? But it's a lot different now. I always joke with the coppers. I'm like, the younger generation of police officers are very health conscious. I asked the cop one day, I go, "Hey, you want to go drinking after work?" He says, "No, I'm going to run 6 miles." I go, "Why are you going to run to the bar? I got a car. I'll drive you." Right? When I came on,
are starting to look yoked out, man. They're getting fit.
Yeah, they're all like little, little machines. All, "Hey,
Yeah.
what's up, Doc?" You're like, "All right, man, take it easy, dude."
Hey, real
you
quick,
got to get
Danny,
through the door, turn sideways.
Steffi says she really appreciates your story, heartfelt awareness, empathy, humor. Always inspiring to hear other stories, life experiences, especially when they come from a completely different trek of life. Thank you so much. And then Jordan says, "Danny, do you suffer from long-term trauma from your line of work?"
Yeah. So I'm trained in EMDR, Jordan, EMDR and eye movements, and I've had it done to me too. So the thing I can tell you about that is, for some people, it's, the whole shebang. They're like, "This is great." And other people, they're like, "I'm not sure it's working." So the EMDR is a game changer when it comes to trauma. So if your therapist wants to do that, because again, I'm trained in it, as a therapist, it's a game changer. Give it a shot. It can't hurt. And it will help you with your trauma. They say that you're, and I don't want to misquote, but I'm going off the cuff here. The eye movements, they say when you have REM sleep, REM sleep, your eyes are moving, right? And that's your deepest sleep. So they try to replicate that eye movements when they do this, right? When they talk about your trauma, they'll say, how you feel, like incident, some guy pulled out a gun and he pulled the trigger and it didn't go off, and I'm like, "Oh my God." So I returned fire, like, this is a story that you might hear. And, I can't sleep. I'm having bad dreams. I'm drinking. I have a lot of issues. And then you ask them, they go through the event and then they'll have a light bar that'll go back and forth at a certain rate of speed, right? For a couple repetitions. Then they'll go, "How you feeling about the event?" "Okay, I'm feeling a little bit better." "Okay, let's do it again." Right? And they'll do it again. And then they'll keep going through that until your anxiety is lowered. Right?
So you relive the event while moving your eyes, simulating REM
Mm-hmm.
until you reliving that event isn't causing stress response?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Again, I don't want to misquote because I didn't expect a question. Otherwise, I would have had some kind of research up here to prove it. So I'm just kind of, I went through the training last year. It was a long process and you have to go through all kinds of stuff for it. And a lot of that, you had it done to me, in the training and all that stuff. So, that was Jordan, right? So Jordan, if your therapist wants to try it, you should try it because I think it'll help greatly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Right back to where we were. So you were undercover.
Mm-hmm.
You're not happy there.
No.
Throwing up at roll call.
Well, that was, so when I was in narcotics, I was not happy, and it was, I hated going to work, and it was tough. Then I went to Chicago, and they said it would be different, right?
Yeah.
Brant did EMDR. He said it can be helpful. So absolutely. So I went to Chicago. I worked in patrol on midnights which, midnight's kind of sucks, especially when you're a people person.
Yeah.
If you're a vampire person, it's perfect. You can hang out with vampires all day. It's, but if you're a people person, so I worked there, and then I went to special ops. Special operations is where they pick people to be on the HPT team. Right. And that's where my dad was before that. And when I got there and I was working there, that's like, I'd go, like, there's times I'd walk in a roll call, I'd puke, like I'd go right in the bathroom and puke because I was just like, I absolutely hate this, I just hate being here. And I think it had a lot to do with the pressure of trying to follow in my dad's footsteps.
How'd you get over that?
Well, at a certain point in time, you just figure, what, I'm me, he's him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's crazy, because I'm the complete opposite as far as relationships with my father.
Yeah.
Like, you're trying to fill heroic shoes and I'm trying not to be my father because of the opposite reasons, That's crazy, but they can both be still the same, like, effect in a sense.
Yeah, it is. It was a lot of pressure because everyone said I was there because of my dad, you know, and it was tough. So I get, people would ride me all of the time about it, and it would turn my stomach, and I'm like, man, so I remember a wise man once told me, because, people, they talk garbage all the time. I'm like, man, I just want to punch the heck out of this guy right in the head, like, he's driving me nuts. And he's like, hey, listen, kid. As he took the cigarette out of his mouth, he goes, listen, kid, we're right underneath the sign in the roll call room that says no smoking. He's like, listen, kid, you sleep in bed with that guy? No. You putting food on his table? No. You sleep with his wife? No. You responsible for his kids? No. Then why the hell you care what he thinks? Like, right. Like, deep thoughts by, this guy, right? I'm like, wow, it was kind of an epiphany, and that's kind of like was a game changer for me, and keep in mind, I was there for about a year, and I got sober for the first time. But so the first year I was kind of like on a tear with those guys, trying to fit in, as the new guy, like trying to separate myself from my dad. So I'd like to party it up a little bit, get my groove on. But it, once I got sober, that's when it really started affecting me, because, when you're drinking, you're like, whatever, man, I don't care. But then when you're sober, you're like, man, I'm working my butt off here. Like, like, I'm not my dad. You know what I mean? I'm like 5 inches taller and much more handsome, So, right. So I'm like, I don't understand why this is going on. And that's when this old guy told me that, I mean, he was old, and he's like, yeah, don't care about that stuff. Who cares? And I was like, wow, that was pretty impactful,
Yeah.
Right. It was, I don't know, probably I was still in that unit, and I started drinking again. So my sobriety lasted throughout my time in that unit, and I started drinking again. Then I got promoted, and I went back to patrol, which I worked midnights again as a supervisor in one of the busiest districts in the city, where I met the finest police officers in the entire police department. They were workhorses. They did a great job. They were professional. The people I worked with there, I just was totally impressed by. When you come from a place like, the HPT team or SWAT team, you tend to get spoiled. You get to work out while you're working. You get to eat wherever you want.
Yeah.
You get to comb your hair, shiny boots, look in the mirror at yourself. Yeah, look at me. I'm a high-speed guy here, tough.
Yeah.
And then you go to patrol, and everyone's like, you're answering 300 calls a night as a group. You're like, wow. And they're not like, Mrs. Jones needs help with her groceries, or, Mrs. Johnson's cat's in the tree. It's like person shot, person stabbed, domestic disturbance, traffic accident with injuries, shots fired. I remember going to a call. This is a great story. I was a brand new sergeant. It was like my second night on the street, and everyone's down for a call. They're like, person stabbed 71st in California by Marquette Park. I don't expect you to know where that is, but anybody tuning in from Chicago knows exactly what I'm talking about. So I pull up, and I see this guy walking, and there's Holy Cross hospitals like between 67th and 61st. The streets are numbered here, so it's like, on the south side, 67th, then you go south, 68, 69, 70th, 71st. Well, Holy Cross, I think, is like 69th and California. So I'm driving to 71st Street, and I'm driving, and I see this guy walking like this. He's just walking. He's got his hand over his eye, and it's midnight, so it's dark. So I'm like, stop, something's not right. So I back up, shine a light on him, and I see blood dripping as he's walking. And I look, and I swear to you, he's holding his eye. It's out of his head. And I go, hey, man, you okay? He goes, yeah. And I'm like, what happened? He goes, nothing. My eye fell out. I'm like, you didn't get stabbed, did you? He goes, no. I'm like, you sure? He goes, yeah. I go, you want to ride to the hospital? He goes, no, I'm good. I'm right here. He's just like nothing's going on. And I'm like, okay. And, I go on the radio. I'm like, 19 Paul Squad, which is our code for, like, hey, everything's okay. Give me another call. what just happened? Right. So these are the calls you constantly get, like you go to domestic, there's blood all over the walls, guys hitting the head. The woman's got, an iron in her hand. She just hit him in the head with the iron because she found out he's cheating on her, and you're like, what the hell is going on here? Right. Like I can't. So that was probably the most incredible time I ever had on the job, working with those people, seeing the things that I saw were just incredible. So going from there, I worked there for about 5 months, and then I went back to the SWAT team. And that was an experience because I went back as a supervisor from a place I came as a police officer. So now there's people that are upset that you're a sergeant and they're not, right? They're really upset about it. And then there's people that, no matter what you do, you can't make them happy. They don't want to have anything to do with the happiness or the nonsense that goes on. So you go back there and you're struggling to be a supervisor of people you used to work with, in a support capacity. So you have a lot of people who, I might have some older people working for me that have been on the team for a long time, and it's a young person's job, so you're doing a lot of equipment maintenance, training stuff, and my dad worked in the building, so it was cool. I got to spend, before my dad retired, his last few years, I got to spend in the same building with him. But then again, it wasn't cool because I'd show up to work and he'd be in there with my guys having coffee and, telling stories. And I'm like, hey, man, we got work to do here. And he's like, hey, shut up. I told the sergeant to shut up. You're like, get out. Right. So, it was interesting, but it was still very difficult. I always felt my whole career I was chasing that. It was a lot of pressure. The affirmation of my dad. We recently had a conversation. Being sober, the light switch sometimes goes off, and you're like, and I had a conversation with my mom, and I said, it was kind of a tumultuous conversation. And I go, yeah, I know. I'm just the flunky son of the hero. So, I said, I'm going to go now. I hung up. My dad calls me. He goes, hey, listen, I'm going to tell you something right now. Just like that. Like, okay. All right, Dad, hit me with your best shot. He's like, you're not a flunky, right? I wish I went to all that school like you did. You know what I mean? But in the same breath, he'll say, I got a high school diploma. You got 3 masters and a doctorate. You can't change a tire, doctor. You know what I mean? He'll throw one of those out there, right? And I'm like, well, Dad, I'm wondering why the tire's flat. Is it depressed? Isn't that feeling good today? And he's like, get out of here, Dr. Phil, before I kick you in the ass. You know what I mean? It's the relationship we have, but it was always, I felt never good enough. You know what I mean? Always felt like it was never, nothing I did was ever good enough. I could have made 50 arrests of guys with rifle machine guns and stuff on the street. And it wouldn't, you're Danny's kid. I always used to joke, I could have caught Osama bin Laden. They'd be like, where's your dad? He gave him, right? Gift wrap. He did, of course. Gift wrap.
Dad gift wrapped it.
Right. So no matter what I did, I always felt that it wasn't good enough. There was a lot of pressure there.
And I had a time like that with my mom. I was in Arizona. I was probably in my 20s. and I was drinking with one of her husbands at the time, and ended up one of those snot crying drunks for some reason. Just I don't know, all the sadness hit me at that 1 second, and I went outside and was crying, and I'm like, all you're gonna see is Dad when you look at me.
Yeah. It's oh man, God, I just told Mary the other day, I said, I kick myself in the behind sometimes, because I'm like, man, if you would have stayed sober instead of drinking for those 4, you'd be 22 years sober. Wow. Yeah, I go to the AA meetings, I get like a medal or something, like, oh, this is the most senior guy here. You know what I mean? Like, I get the best chair. I get the first cup of coffee, So, man, just the regret hits me sometimes with that. And, my dad's been sober for 28 years.
Wow.
And when he drank, he was not a pleasant drunk whatsoever. And I was kind of I think I often think of like my one friend who's been sober for quite some time says there's all kinds of different kind of drunks, right? There's the happy drunk, there's the violent drunk, there's this drunk, there's that drunk. He breaks them down. I never wanted any drama. I just didn't want the party to stop. You know what I mean? I'd spend every dollar, every cent, because I didn't want to be alone, and I was in pure misery. I had to be around people and have some sort of, I don't know, like admiration from them. So I'd buy them, like, you got to go. Well, yeah, I'm out of money. Here, I'll buy you drinks. Please stay. Yeah. You know what I mean? So when I got sober again, I went to my dad and I said, hey, I want you to know I quit drinking. Again, searching for that admiration, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And he goes, you're welcome. Thanks. He said to me, he goes, oh, wait a minute. If you would have stayed sober, you'd be sober for like 23 years now. And I'm like, thanks for pointing that out. Thanks you could do math. I appreciate it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just told you I'm getting sober again. That's, so I always chased that admiration, and it was just entirely too much pressure, and then having to perform. My kid's mother, she's a mentally ill person, right? Depression, she, God love her, she tried, but I had the kids, I was the residential parent. I took care of all their bills. I took care of everything. That on top of taking care of Danny's like having 3 kids, this, right? Yeah. With your boy. So it's like all that pressure, it was too much, and then the relapse came, and then the lies, that relapse brain, it was just tough. It was really, really tough. And working on the job, and then thinking all the past, nightmares that I still have, it just wasn't healthy. But now it's all different, right? We can just change it. We decide, hey, with some help, the grace of God, our support system, I think the number one thing for me is support system. Knowing I have somebody in my corner, like, you were talking about your wife, earlier, and that's an incredible thing. You owe a lot to her for sticking it out with you, right? Having that support and having somebody in your corner is a huge thing. And no matter what happens, we can achieve our goals. Right. But God's number one, if it wasn't for him, I don't think I'd be sitting here right now, for sure.
That's amazing.
For sure.
So what was your injury? We got a couple minutes left, and like I said, we might have to have you on a Sunday too.
That's fine. So in 1997, my partner and I, we were chasing a hot car, because back then you could chase a hot car, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And Danny's in the background. He's got to steal the spotlight. See him? He's right there. He's hovering. He's probably going to ask me for popcorn or something. Danny, wave hi. There you go. Good job. Yeah, go ahead, Dan. So in 1997, my partner and I were chasing a car. It was a stolen car, and back then, you could, like in Chicago now, you can't chase cars, you can't foot chase people. It's ridiculous. So we're chasing a stolen car. I mean, I never worked in the garden spots ever. It didn't work like anywhere where Mrs. Jones' cat was in the tree, or everyone's like, "Hi, officer, have a great day." It was like, "F you, get out of here." That's everywhere I worked, right? So we chased this car. I end up in a foot chase with a guy, and he ends up trying to get my gun out of my holster, right? Because he had a gun, he tossed his gun, and he's trying to get my gun out of my holster. So we end up fighting over that. And I take him down and I cuff him. And at a certain point in time, I got my nose broken by the guy. My nose was broken. And then I broke my wrist at a certain point in time, the scaphoid, small little bone right here in your wrist.
Yeah.
So I broke that, was off of work for 10 months. Electromagnetic therapy every day for 10 hours because there's not a lot of blood that goes to that bone. And it could not, sometimes you can get a non-union, right? Which is what happened to me. So after 10 months, the boss called me up and said, hey, you're going to go to special ops. You got to come off the medical role. I'm like, okay, I'll do what I can. So they took the cast off, sent me to therapy, did a bone scan. They're like, yep, it's healed. Go back to work. Shot my gun. Everything was good. Go back to work. 14 years later, we're doing training and we're doing equipment inspection. While we're doing this, something pops in my hand. Poop. And my hand just swells up. I'm like, wow, I couldn't even turn the doorknob on the room to get out of it. It was painful. So I go to the commander of the unit and he's like, I'm taking it to the hospital. That my hand just swelled up. So he took me to the hospital. I wish it was a flashy, sexy story, but it's not. So, I was swinging from a gutter with a knife in my teeth and, taking it gunfire, but it's not like that at all. So I went to the hospital and they're like, hey, you broke your wrist. I'm like, it's just removing something, after training. And he's like, yeah, it's broken. You got to go to a specialist. So I went to the specialist and he's like, did you ever break this before? I go 14 years ago. It never healed. You work for 14 years with a broken wrist.
Oh, dang.
Wow.
He goes, did it hurt? And I'm like, well, yeah, it hurt. He's like, did it hurt during the 14 years? I'm like, well, hell yeah, it hurt a lot of times. It just, some days I'd wake up and my wrist wouldn't even move. Seriously. He's like, what'd you do? I go, I took some aspirin and went to work. And he's like, well, why wouldn't you come back? I go, where I worked? Like I had a lieutenant on the job that if I went to him and said, sir, something's wrong with my wrist. He'd go, oh, my wrist hurts. Oh, okay. Your wrist can hurt in the worst district in the city tomorrow. You're out of here. That's what he would say. You know what I mean? I'm not going to, I'm going to take care of business. So I had to have a surgery. They removed 3 bones from my hand. I went through about 3 months of therapy, and then they said, you've reached maximum medical improvement. So I don't have a lot of motion with my wrist. And the doctor's like, I cannot in good conscience tell you, try to go shoot a gun, and furthermore, you don't have enough strength in that hand. Like this hand will squeeze like 140 and this one's like 30. Battery. Right. So, then I had to have another surgery where they took a 4th bone out and they moved my,
I'm
nerve.
still here.
Yeah. They moved my nerve, in my elbow. They popped my nerve off and moved it. And then I had another surgery where, they went in and scraped some bone debris and everything like that. So I have 3 surgeries. I have to get regular cortisone shots because I have triggering where your finger like locks up like this. And you kind of have to like straighten it out. So as my dad would say, these tree fingers right here, they sometimes they just go whoop and they won't straighten out. So I have to have cortisone shots annually. And I'm trying to put off, they want to fully fuse it, which means then it's going to suck. So I'm like, can I do anything I possibly can to keep that off? So I had to leave the job. I had 20 years. I had the pension out. So, man, the bad part of that was I was right where I wanted to be, the chief negotiator, and I was moving up. You know what I mean? Like I had a good trajectory. I was going to probably move up the ladder on the police department and get to the places that I wanted to be, and finally surpass, the legend of Dan McGuire Sr. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, he probably would have helped you get there. That was all him.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate that. Hang on.
He talked to the president.
Hang on. Let me go to the rickety stool store now. Thanks. I appreciate it. So yeah, no, yeah. I'm sure. So that was about it on the injury thing. And so I started teaching at a college because all the education I amassed over the years. So now I teach. So.
So you did you ever get into the hardcore drugs? Any cocaine?
No.
Amphetamines? You were just alcohol.
No. Yeah. I was petrified, to be fair, because of the addiction with the alcohol. Like when they give me pain pills for surgery, I'm like, ooh, you look entirely too good. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, we're going to go comatose, but I'm like, I can't do it because if I do it, it's going to be a whole new level. You know what I mean? It was hard. It was hard, LT. I was close, real close to bridging that, going over that. So, yeah.
Awesome.
But alcohol was my poison. So,
okay. Well, maybe not next Sunday, but the following Sunday we could have you back on and we'll do a part 2 with you and get a little more into there.
Cool.
Pick up in the 20s and comb through more of your story. And then maybe we'll have some questions laid out that they'd like you from your educational side to answer. We'll gather up a bunch of questions and go through that, and we'll probably have you back in a couple Sundays or something like that.
Sounds great, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
We always end our show with the Serenity Prayer. You can join us if you'd like.
Sure.
God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Awesome. All right, y'all. I will see you Tuesday morning for our live stream as always. So until then, do not put yourself in a high risk situation. Stay strong, work your program, and remember, we recover better together.